Good evening to my fellow alumni and friends of Washington University. My name is Rob Wild, and I'm the Interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at WashU. And fittingly, I'm coming to you live this evening from my office in the Danforth University Center, a building that serves our students, dedicated in 2009 to recognize the significant and lasting contributions of Chancellor Danforth and his late wife, Elizabeth Danforth. While I am an administrator at Washington University, I am also a graduate. I attended Washington University from 1989 to 1993. My wife Angie and I met here, and we both experienced and have benefited from the outstanding leadership and sense of community that Chancellor Danforth brought to our great university. William H. Danforth was the Chancellor of Washington University from 1971 to 1995. He served as a trustee beginning in 1995. Prior to becoming Chancellor in 1971, Bill Danforth served as a faculty member in the School of Medicine, beginning his WashU career as a cardiologist here in 1957. All told, Bill Danforth served Washington University for a remarkable 65 years. William H. Danforth passed away peacefully here in St. Louis on September 16th at the age of 94. Because of COVID, we are not yet able to have a fitting in-person tribute to honor his legacy. But as Bill Danforth would have done, we are turning a negative into a positive, and we are taking this opportunity to use technology to safely bring together a community of alumni from all around the country and the world. This community represents the over 60,000 students who graduated during the time that Bill Danforth was Chancellor. Tonight, you will hear brief reflections from 14 outstanding Washington University graduates. Their stories demonstrate the true and lasting legacy and impact of Chancellor Danforth. We will end the evening with a short reflection by one of our current students, a Danforth Scholar. One quick logistical note as your MC for the evening, I will very briefly introduce each speaker or pair of speakers before they provide their remarks. Before we start our formal program, I wanted to share some words from Chan Dan himself. As all of you would know that one of Bill Danforth's greatest gifts was as a public speaker, a writer, and a storyteller. He always knew the right thing to say in the moment. His bedtime stories were a legendary campus tradition that imparted important morals, values, and lasting life lessons to those of us who heard them. Shortly after Bill's passing in September, my friend Karen Levin Coburn, a long-serving leader in student affairs at WashU during the Danforth era, shared with me a collection of reflections from Bill Danforth that really demonstrated his passion for WashU and his belief in the transformative power of a world-class education and the power that it can hold for a region, our country, and indeed the world. I will paraphrase and quote from a few lines he gave during the class reunion on May 17th, 1986. Perhaps some of you here tonight were there at that event. One of the things any chancellor sees is the enormous effort that goes into Washington University. We aren't the first to work for the institution. Sometimes when I walk through the quadrangle at night, I think of the enormous energy and treasure that it has taken to bring us this far. I try to commune with the campus and feel the spirit of those who have walked the same brick paths in earlier years. I think of students entering as immature 18-year-olds and some leaving as immature 22-year-olds, but more leaving after they have acquired the beginnings of wisdom and understanding. I think of young people walking absent-mindedly over the bricks, intoxicated with ideas that suddenly connect and open a whole new vision of the world. I can imagine the laughter, the play, the blossoming of love in the springtime, and the gradual growth and the acquisition of a grander vision of what one is and what one might become. Universities endure, I believe, because they promise hope and renewal, two perennial human needs. Chancellor Danforth, your words ring true 34 years later, especially in these challenging times. Know that when we collectively walk the brick paths of our campus, the Danforth campus, we walk with your spirit and in your footsteps, sharing your desire and vision for a brighter and better world that lies ahead. We would now like to share a short tribute video.
I'd like to leave behind the idea that character is very important. And you need character, honesty, integrity, concern for others, efforts to make the place better. Character endures.
William Henry Danforth set the example. Born in St. Louis in 1926, he would go on to become one of the most influential leaders in American higher education. Graduating with a medical degree from Harvard, he would serve his country as a Navy physician during the Korean War before returning home to join the Washington University faculty. Within a decade, he had risen to lead the School of Medicine, and 6 years later, he would be the 13th Chancellor of Washington University. For 24 years, he led with integrity, compassion, a strong work ethic, and a sense of purpose, transforming WashU from a commuter campus to a world-renowned institution, assisted through it all by his wife, Ibby, a beloved and engaged First Lady. He would go on to launch one of America's most successful university fundraising efforts, increasing the endowment to nearly $2 billion, adding 70 endowed professorships, and tripling the number of student scholarships. In a life devoted to others, he made his mark not only on higher education, but also on the individual lives of staff, faculty, and generations of alumni.
I recall sitting on the athletic field in August 1981, while Uncle Bill, dressed in pajamas, read bedtime stories to thousands of students on a warm St. Louis evening.
Unassuming, understated, brilliant, and kind, he taught us so many lessons.
He always made time. You could find him sitting on a bench in the quad. Somehow Chandan managed to change this concept of an ivory tower, and I think we really valued that.
Chancellor Danforth was an advocate for academic freedom, receiving recognition from the American Association of University Professors and named the 1977 Man of the Year. Yet for all of his accomplishments as a medical doctor, university chancellor, and civic leader, he considered his greatest achievement to be the nearly 60,000 students who graduated during his tenure.
Bill was by far the very best boss I ever had. He never failed to treat me with the utmost respect.
She sent me a letter that I treasure, which said, "I have long felt that the greatest people of Washington University were those whose life and character inspired the rest of us. Dr. Danforth was an example to us all."
Thank you, Dr. Danforth, for your inspiration, your leadership, your kindness, and your enormous impact on Washington University, the entire St. Louis community, and the world. Rest in peace.
Our first speaker of the evening will be Mr. Shelby Jordan, Arts and Sciences, class of 1974. Go ahead, Shelby.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to you, Rob, and those of you who are responsible for this evening. And then secondly, I'd like to say to the family, my family appreciates your acceptance of our family over the last 30 some odd years, and that the generosity you've shown toward us in allowing us to be a part of special occasions. I've spent a lot of time, my family and I, Donzella, she and I now have been married 42 years, spent a lot of time with his daughter Beth and her two children, Robert and Hope. And we want them to know, as well as other members of the family and close friends, as Mr. Lincoln Meyer and his wife and others, that we continue to keep all of you in our prayers each and every day, that we pray God would breathe His Spirit into you, that you may continue to have life and pour His Spirit upon you, that you may have power to do great things according to His will, for His glory and for your good and the good of others, and that He would tabernacle over you, covering you as a tent, protecting you from all evil and the adversaries of your soul. I entered Washington University as a freshman after graduating from East St. Louis Senior High School and living in the south end of East St. Louis. My dad was a union laborer at Mount Sinai Chemical Company for 35 some odd years. And he said to me when I graduated from high school, I cannot afford to send you to college. You'll have to come to Mount Santo and work with me, join the military, or figure out college if you can. Fortunately, Washington University had a career scholarship program, which Mrs. Gloria White was responsible for. I qualified, entered that program, worked during the day and attended classes at night for 2 years, but I also had an opportunity to be a part of a great athletic experience. I had grown 4 inches in 3 months when I turned 17, and I was awkward and not a very good athlete, but I was accepted as a part of what was known as the Dirty 30 of Washington University Battling Bears. And we had a great experience as young men, learning about each other and seeing places in the country that I otherwise would not have seen. Over the last 30 years, the closeness of our relationship with Dr. Danforth has evolved around a lot of the community work that my wife and I are responsible for. During times that he's taken us on tours through the Plant Science Center, invited my wife and I to be the guests at Camp Minnewaca, and asked me to speak to the young people during the summer on the aspects of leadership. And so there's just many things in which I'd like to have an opportunity to share, but of course, time is of essence. As we've received an autographed copy of the Thanksgiving letters that Dr. Danforth has written each year, there was one in particular that came to attention, but I just wanted to share with all of you this evening because I think it's appropriate that these remarks that I'm making are mostly in the words of Dr. Danforth. And it begins by saying, I frequently ask what I actually do as a chancellor. Sometimes I wonder myself. And one of my favorite stories, my youngest daughter, my sister of another mother, as she calls it, Beth, explains to a friend that Daddy does not do anything. He used to be a doctor and make people well, but now he just goes to meetings. Then Dr. Danforth goes on to say, I actually can no longer view myself as a physician, although that calling of my younger years will always shape my view of the world. Despite all of the advances in care, I still feel at home with doctors and in special culture of those who have the responsibility for the life and health of others. He then goes on to say, I am no longer a scientist, although the thrill of trying to understand a small segment of reality and then generalize for those findings will never leave me. Always, I will honor those who add a human understanding. I consider them to be the hope of our world. Next, he says, I can hardly consider myself an educator. The real learning at the university occurs in the classroom, the libraries, and the laboratories, under the guidance of scholars, teachers who devote their lives to this great endeavor. Then he says, I am an academic administrator. I believe in administration. Without people who see to it that things run well, any institution would be in shambles. The creativity, perseverance, and energy of my administrative colleagues have contributed more to Washington University than I could ever put into words. They are especially important because my own skills are limited, the product of on-the-job training. He said, I'd like to think that my present vocation is to help preserve and build an institution that embodies values and promote activities in which I believe. Finally, I'd like to say that as I think about the quiet times in which my wife and I, during our visits, where Marianne and Gail always found an opportunity for us to somehow or another get onto his schedule. We'd have lunch sometimes in his conference room, sometimes we'd go out. But in each instance, he would always quietly and peacefully say to me, well, how are you doing? And he'd listen with great interest. Then he would say, well, what's new? And of course, we were always anxious to tell him of our new transformative work here in Los Angeles, helping people who have little money to pay for housing, and how in a 19-block area adjacent to Exposition Park, where now George Lucas is building a $1.5 million internationally acclaimed narrative arts museum, he was interested in all of those things. And then he would say, well, that's interesting. Many of you can recall those kinds of exchanges with Dr. Danforth. And as I think about his influence on society, on Washington University, and all the faculty, the Gloria Weiss, the Jim McLeods, the Sharon Stalls, and then having Mark and Wright and Chancellor Wright and his wife Riza pick up the mantle and carry it forward in such a successful manner, I'm always very much excited and feel as if I'm at home when I come onto the campus. And I make it a point of coming onto the campus every time we come back to St. Louis to visit, because I'm reinvigorated, as if my first opportunity to step onto the campus. And so I just wanted to close by saying, when I think about Dr. Danforth's heart and how calm and peaceful he was always when we were in his presence and as we observed him in the presence of others, I noticed that sometimes it was difficult to discern exactly what he was thinking. But he was always seemingly very contemplative as he listened and responded. He did not hide his heart. When the book of Proverbs, the 4th chapter, 24th verse, he says, by all things guard your heart with everything you do, because it flows from it. He guarded his heart, but he did not hide it. In today's world, he would say, don't hide your heart. Those of us who understand the importance of relationships and how it made this country and it will help this country go forward, Washington University is a place that have cultivated this idea with others to move forward, developing relationships, meaningful relationships with the people, your neighbors, your colleagues, and others, to help them understand that you hear them when they talk to you, that you care about their trajectory, their families. Because in doing so, I think that that's the best way that we can actually honor and remember Chancellor Danforth. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. Great words, great wisdom. I'd now like to introduce Andy Bursky, who earned engineering and arts and sciences degrees from Washington University in 1978.
Thanks, Rob. As I reflected on the loss of my friend Bill Danforth, I've been struck by how the current time provides the perfect contrast to the lasting memories of Bill that live within all of us. In a time when civility seems to be lost, Bill was unfailingly civil. In a period when competence seems in short supply, Bill was masterfully competent. In an age when our most revered and important institutions have come under attack, Bill recognized that institutions form the unique and enduring fabric of our country, and he devoted his life to creating one of the great institutions of the world. At a point where science itself has been debased, Bill was born of the scientific method. When quiet, thoughtful, and compassionate leadership seems to be in short supply, Bill's inimitable leadership was always quiet, always thoughtful, always compassionate. You know, we're fortunate if we have the privilege just once in our life to meet a giant, particularly so if that connection occurs during our most formative years. I had the privilege and good fortune of first meeting Bill Danforth as I matriculated at Washington University in the late summer of 1974. The Chancellor, as I knew him then, was a formidable but approachable man without pretense. As a 17-year-old with limited insight or concern about our relative stations in life, I struck up a conversation with this angular gentleman who had been kind enough to invite me and other entering freshmen to his residence for a weekend picnic before classes began. Our very first conversation was devoid of small talk. It was substantive, it was far-ranging, and in 15 minutes he had me thinking about things I had never considered before. I was transfixed, and a 46-year friendship was born. In many ways, Bill and I were opposites, beyond our obvious difference in physical stature. And the more I got to know him in those early years, the more I aspired to adopt some of his remarkable characteristics. While I was quick to absorb the facts, process them, and respond, Bill would think deeply, seek out and consider other opinions, and assess second and third order effects before responding. Bill taught me judgment. While I was unwilling to tolerate the slow pace at which many human processes moved, Bill understood that commitment from others often required individuals to get to the objective in their own way and in their own time. Bill taught me patience. While I regularly had high conviction that my way was the right way, Bill had a habit of encouraging others to take the lead and then helping them to succeed. Bill taught me the power of quiet leadership. And these lessons continued for a lifetime. I am who I am in no small measure because of the time spent with Bill and the personal energy and care he invested in me. I am fully aware of the unmatched and remarkable contributions Bill Danforth made to Washington University, to the St. Louis community, and to the broader global community. But my fondest memories are intensely personal, of the time we spent in deep discussions over 5 decades, of the kindness he and Ibby shared with Jane and me at times of triumph and tragedy, and of the questions he would ask that allowed me to unveil my own truth. Good night, Bill.
Thank you, Andy. We're now going to hear from Sarah Bowles, who earned a bachelor's and MBA from the Olin School of Business. Sarah.
Thank you, Rob. This is Sarah Bowles talking, and thank you very much to the organizers of this for including me in this wonderful tribute. One of my very favorite quotes from Bill was something he wrote those annual letters. A couple of other people have mentioned that. And one of my favorite quotes, which has influenced my life for decades, is, "It's an honor and a privilege to pass understanding from one generation to another." I'm just going to say that again. It's an honor and a privilege to pass understanding from one generation to another. And the beautiful thing about that is, you know, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer or an educator, whether you could be a elementary school teacher or a mom, you're still part of that great human chain that passes understanding from one generation to the other. So he took he took all of his resources, all of his intelligence, his brilliance, his capabilities, his kindness. He took all of that and channeled it into helping other people understand that they were part of this great human chain. Again, I read that in the annual letter. I was a student at Washington University from the fall of 1977 to the spring of '81. And I certainly could talk about the profound impact that he had on Washington University. I could talk about many of the things that have already been touched on it that you'll hear from other people, and how he developed the Danforth campus, and certainly how, you know, my education at Washington University influenced my career on Wall Street and opened doors that otherwise wouldn't have been open to me. But I think, speaking candidly, the very best way that I can add value to this conversation and to this tribute would be to share the fact that I knew him personally. I knew him, he was a close family friend. The Danforths were close family friends. I had the great honor, it's a great privilege. My dad went to medical school and Bill and my dad were lifelong friends. And yeah, I think it's really important to just say that as fantastic and wonderful and revered that he is at Washington University, and certainly with, in St. Louis, but then nationally, he was very much that individual at home too. He was very much that individual, on a personal at home on a Saturday morning. So I think all of us know individuals that can be hugely successful professionally or have a certain image, on the outside, but then maybe as time unfolds, you hear about character gaps on the home front or in other situations with the family, whatever. But I just want to attest to the fact that this was an individual that what you saw is what you got, and there was such continuity of character that it was beautiful and impressive. One short story, he did adopt children. So he had 4 adopted children. I was close friends with Cindy, his oldest, when we were in elementary school. And I remember quite vividly that one of the things that impressed me, probably my first impression of Bill Danforth, was that he took the time out of his very busy schedule to every Wednesday afternoon, take one of his 4 children to Spicer's, which was a 5 and dime in Clayton, and he would let them pick out $1 worth of candy. And it doesn't sound like much, but on the other hand, when you think about it, for a father to take individual time with each child and give them the chance to go to do something fun, like go to Spicer's and buy candy, he clearly he entered their lives where they were, and he made a point of connecting with them, at their level. And I think he pretty consistently did that throughout his entire life, irrespective of your station or position, wherewithal, education, etc. That was one of his major gifts. The fact that he did adopt, that was really the model that I used when I got to a point in my own family formation after business school, after working on Wall Street, that allowed me to expand my family. I have a bio-adoptive family, so I have 2 biological children and 2 adopted children. And it was really having the Danforths in my life that gave me that kind of insight into the richness that comes from accepting the fact that families are formed a whole lot of different ways. I think what really impressed me, more than his intelligence, more than his kindness, more than his being supremely capable, I think the 2 things that I impressed me the most is his vision and his humility. I think any of us probably know people who are very successful. Maybe others of us know people who have been financially successful. And I think some of us may know that, not all people are selfless or focused on other. And so his vision was extraordinary. His vision for Washington University, what he realized it could become. His vision setting up the Donald C. Danforth Plant Science Center, which he, very humbly just attributed to, when I said, well, what are you working on? And his comment was, I'm just trying to solve world hunger. So, and later at another point in time, I say this with humility, when he and his brother, his siblings were awarded a national award, philanthropic award, recognizing them for, what they had done in terms of the nation, contributions to the nation. I said, well, congratulations on that award. To which he said, with tremendous humility, he said, oh, my grandfather started this company, set up a foundation. It grew over 100 years. And basically, my brother and I just spent it all out. So very matter of fact, very, very calm, very peaceful, very quiet. But again, to be able to not have any ego in that, I think is just an incredibly beautiful aspect of his character, his personality. Combined, of course, with the vision to have the vision that he did have. It was an honor. It is an honor to be a Washington University graduate. It was an honor to be on the Danforth campus. And it's, I can honestly say that it's an honor and a privilege to be part of that great human chain that Bill Danforth was a part of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was very nice, very, very touching. Now, our next speaker is our farthest away geographically virtual speaker. I'd like to introduce Punita Singh, who earned a Master of Arts in Psychology in 1984 and a Doctor of Philosophy in Communication Sciences in 1990. Punita.
Thanks. I dare you. That was the title of a little square book that sat on my father's bookshelf and was my first introduction to the name Danforth. In it were inspiring notions about thinking bigger, acting bigger, living bigger, the imperative to bring forth unused capacities and deploy them for peak performance. The author wrote about living a four-square life, daring the reader to develop physical, mental, social, and spiritual dimensions, integrating body, brain, heart, and soul. These are things that latter-day motivational gurus continue to echo, while that book was written in 1931. And the author of that book was William Danforth, our beloved Chancellor Danforth's grandfather, an inspiring leader and institution builder who embodied the ideas that he shared in that book. So I grew up reading this book and wearing my dad's old WashU t-shirts and hearing about his time in the US in the early 50s. Go west, young man was a popular phrase back then. So dad had ventured out. An 18-year-old turbaned Indian jumping ships, trains, and buses to make it west. He only got to the Midwest, but he found gold. Washington University in St. Louis, a great place to learn and grow. 3 decades later, my brother and I found our way there as well, though our journey by air was nowhere near as exciting as dad's. We are a family of WashU grads. My father earned his MBA in the 50s and was honored with a Doctor of Laws in the 80s. My brother earned his engineering and MBA degrees in the 80s, and I earned an interdisciplinary master's in psychoacoustics in 1984, and after a hiatus came back for a PhD that I got in 1990. It was a fantastic interdisciplinary program that I was a part of. And my doctoral defense, oh my God, that was a daunting affair with Ira Hirsch chairing and 8 university departments represented for the interrogation. And just to add that little bit more pressure, my parents and Dr. Danforth were there as well. But I guess it's good in a way for many people to come to your defense, pun intended. Beyond the PhD, I continued to visit St. Louis fairly regularly. On one such visit in 2012, I had gone to meet Dr. Danforth at his home. He was still quite active then, though he had stopped driving. I was taken aback when he met me outside his house and jumped into my rental car. "I want to show you the Plant Science Center," he said with a broad grin. So I was really nervous about driving the wrong side of the road from an Indian perspective with jet lag and this precious cargo. But we got there safe and sound. He really loved that place. And after proudly showing me around, we returned to his house where his grandkids had got together for a barbecue and ice cream party. It was great to be in that multi-generational gathering and see the younger Beth and the younger Dorothy with their senior namesakes. I think there's a picture there somewhere of them. It was a very special day with a very special person. My long and varied activities at WashU provided many opportunities for interaction with the Danforths. Seminars, concerts, sporting events, shared meals at the university, their home, even in our little student apartment that my brother and I shared. And one summer, they invited us up to that American Youth Foundation camp in Minnewanka in Michigan. And what a special place that was, where the young campers were living that four-square life with physical, mental, social, and spiritual activities with the Vesper prayers in the evening. And we got to know the Danforth family well there. Cindy, David and Tina, Anne, Beth. And it was a privilege to be a part of Anne and Beth's weddings. And speaking of weddings, we also attended Bill and Ibby's wedding. I think there was a collage that came by earlier showing Bill and Abby's wedding. Yes, they had come to India on an official trip in 2000 and were celebrating their 50th anniversary that year. And my dad, in his playful, enterprising way, decided to arrange an Indian wedding ceremony for them to renew their vows. So the entire WashU entourage was decked up in Indian finery, and they came up to the house in a procession, as we do in India, Bharat, with a white horse leading the way. And then the couple garlanded each other, and my dad officiated at the ceremonies, and they walked around the holy book, in this case, a Bible, and we sang Sikh wedding ceremonies hymns. It was a bit of a nutty idea, but the Danforths played along and recalled it later as a very special time in their lives. It's been an honor to share these thoughts here today, and I'd also like to add my brother Inderdeep, Ina's words as well. On hearing about Dr. D's passing, he said Dr. Danforth was a wonderful human being and one of the finest people I've ever met. Warm, gentle, humble, caring, and always helpful to everybody around him. He loved Washington University and was always focused on how to make WashU and the St. Louis community better. If my father were here, he would certainly have had a lot to say about Bill Danforth. My father, Gurpreet, who was also called Pete Singh, loved Bill and honored him in India by naming a skill building center at a school that he founded, the Danforth Center for Youth Entrepreneurship. Since this is a virtual memorial service, let me add also Dad's voice from the beyond. And this is something he wrote in 2006 about Bill. I'm quoting him. While many of us may not reach the heights of thinking tall and living tall, the ideals set out in his grandfather's book, the one person who comes to mind who has reached those heights in every aspect of his life and displayed the highest standards and examples is Bill Danforth. He is truly a worthy grandson of an illustrious grandfather. He has enhanced the name of the Danforth family by providing leadership by example and by being one of the most kind, caring, considerate, and courteous human beings. I and my whole family deem it an honor and a privilege to have known him and Ibby, and for having received in plenty their love and friendship. We value this friendship as one of the greatest assets that life has given us. There are few in this world who would equal Bill Danforth as a caring human being. Dad passed away 2 years ago, but 14 years later, these words of his for Bill Danforth still resonate. We miss Bill, we miss them. They who were tall, not just in stature, but in word, thought, and deed. I feel blessed to have known him, and I'm so glad I was able to meet him last October at the inauguration event as the baton was passed from Dr. Mark Wrighton to Dr. Andrew Martin. May Bill Danforth's spirit soar in joy and know how beloved he was to so many.
Thank you, Punita. Next, we are going to hear from J.T. Medor, who earned a Bachelor of Arts in History from Washington University in 1987.
Thank you for including me in this evening's tribute to Dr. Danforth. I'm J.T. Medor, and before I share my memory, I'd like to offer my condolences to the Danforth family and to the students, faculty, staff, and alumni who benefited from Uncle Bill's many contributions to Washington University. When I received an email and text on September 16th from two friends in St. Louis telling me of Dr. Danforth's passing, I thought about the time 35 years ago when Uncle Bill saved Student Life newspaper. In the fall of 1985, the fate of Student Life was literally in the hands of Danforth. The newspaper's business manager had skipped town with the Treasury. There was no money to even publish the next issue. That news was gleefully delivered to Eric Norland and me the day before fall break by the Dean of Student Affairs. Eric and I had been co-editors for about 6 months and had been Student Life staffers since freshman year, but we had no idea about the paper's finances. We were doubly shocked when the dean told us there was nothing he could do to help. There was no money in his budget for printing a newspaper, he said. As Eric and I walked back to the Student Life offices, then on the top floor of Carl Umrath Hall, We vented our anger at the paper's thieving business manager. We also vowed to keep publishing. I believe it was Eric's idea to contact Danforth. I placed a call to the Chancellor's office, and in less than an hour, we were telling him about student life's crisis. When we asked what we should do, he said, "Keep publishing." Danforth said the university would make a loan to Student Life with generous terms and recruit an honest business manager. He also said, "The university cannot put the paper out. Only you and the Student Life staff can do that. Promise me you won't miss an issue." Eric and I were in disbelief. Danforth was rescuing Student Life, which often was a thorn in his side. The news and opinion pages were filled with criticism about tuition hikes, funding for science over the arts, the need for a more diverse student body, and other controversies. I remember asking Danforth why he was helping us. He said, "Student Life serves the Washington University community with its reporting, and you and the staff are learning as much in Umrath Hall as you are in the classroom." The following Sunday night, as the Student Life staff was editing stories, writing an editorial, and designing pages, I received a telephone call from Danforth asking if he could stop by. Around 9 p.m., he and wife Ibby arrived with Ted Drew's frozen custard. They didn't stay long, but I remember Danforth insisting on shaking hands with every staff member and thanking them for their dedication to the newspaper. Student Life, started in 1878, remains the oldest continuously published newspaper in Missouri because of Uncle Bill's dedication to student journalism and the First Amendment. Thank you, Dr. Danforth. Rest in peace.
Thank you, JT. Love those photos. Our next speaker, I apologize, we have two speakers who are traveling virtually from a long ways away. We have Jimmy Leong, who graduated in 1991 with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. Jimmy.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, everyone. So I was an international student from Singapore who enrolled in Washington University in 1987 as an undergraduate in the engineering school. So I first met Dr. Danforth in 1987 at Styx International House, where he warmly welcomed the new international students during a reception. So my very first impression of Dr. Danforth was someone who is highly approachable and friendly. He made an effort to forge a social bond, and it certainly helps with that very contagious smile of his. So on several occasions on campus during my undergraduate days, I would run into him, and he would always make an effort to have a chat with me despite his busy schedule as Chancellor. So this has certainly left a very strong impression on me. And after graduation, I stayed in touch with Dr. Danforth and had many opportunities to meet with him, his wife, Ibby, and a university board of trustees, including the Van Cleves and the Libermans during their frequent visits to Asia in the 1990s. So I remember very clearly during one of the events we held in Singapore, where I started the evening by making a speech to introduce Dr. Danforth. I was probably 23 years old then and didn't have a lot of public speaking experience, so I was indeed very nervous. But when I got off that stage, Dr. Danforth kind of put me aside and told me that he never knew that I was such a good public speaker. So what I didn't tell him was that the introductory script was in fact pre-prepared by the alumni office, and I was just reading from that script, the very script. So nonetheless, his words of encouragement gave me so much confidence and inspired me a lot to improve myself in public speaking till this very, very day. I'd like to sincerely thank him for that. So over the years, I remember very fondly my trips back to St. Louis that will never be complete without a visit with Dr. Danforth. He will always welcome me with open arms, and we would spend time chatting about his trips to Asia, as well as his fond memories of the time spent with my parents, my family, and friends. We would also talk about how to increase the visibility of Washington University in Asia, and how do we attract more international students, and also how what projects he was working on with regards to solving world hunger problems. Another recurring topic is very much his admiration and respect for Singapore's founding father, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. So my last visit with Dr. Danforth was in 2016 at his home in Ladue, where we chatted over Chinese tea that I brought with me. He enjoyed the tea very much. I especially remember Dr. Danforth's smile, his friendliness, loving nature, a true gentleman, and his thoughtfulness. When I got married, Dr. Danforth sent me a wedding gift. I was very pleasantly surprised when it arrived in the mail all the way from St. Louis to Hong Kong. I was living in Hong Kong then. So that silver plate or that silver tray still sits in my living room up to this very, very day. Dr. Danforth was an especially giving person who radiates humility and a great mentor to me. Having a very positive impact on the lives of others unknowingly is probably the greatest legacy that someone can leave behind. So Dr. Danforth has certainly had a positive impact on the lives of many people, including myself. He will be missed by all of us who loved him, and for his dedication to giving the time and devotion and appreciation for all who knew him, regardless of how long he knew them. Thank you, Dr. Danforth, for being such an inspiration and for being such a genuine person of great character, a friend, a visionary, and a lifelong teacher. So your legacy will live on in the hearts of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Next, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Ericka Hayes, who earned her engineering degree from the College of, a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering and a medical degree in 1998. Ericka.
Hello. I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to join this celebration of Chan Dan's life, and also express my condolences to the family. So I'm going to start with a personal story of kind of when I first came to Washington University. So I grew up in Mississippi. St. Louis was 8 hours away, and the furthest away really I had ever been from home. My parents drove me up, and I think they were rather nervous about leaving me here in this great big city all by myself and wondering if I would be okay. I came in as one of the second class of John B. Irvin scholars here at Washington University. And on the final night that my parents were going to be in town, there was a dinner for the scholarship program that my parents and I attended. And Chancellor Danforth and Mrs. Danforth were both at that event. And so my father, who is from a rural town in Mississippi, who is to say he is gregarious would be a great understatement. He's a charmer and he loves to talk everyone's ear off. And so of course, he saw the Chancellor, beelined right to him, introduced him, and started talking his ear off. We were lucky enough to be seated with Chancellor Danforth and his wife. And my dad, chatted his ear off all night, and Chancellor Danforth had a very spirited conversation and discussion with them. I think by the time it was over, my dad had told him his entire life story, my entire life story, and potentially the life story of multiple generations of my family. And so I think, his warmth and his welcoming and his just down-to-earthness, my parents, I think, finally relaxed and were able to say, we're going to leave her and she's going to be okay, because this is the man that runs the institution. And he, was just like, a family member that you could sit and talk to. And he was so warm, so welcoming, so kind, so humble. And, obviously all of the students loved him, and as did I for my time as an undergrad at Washington University. I had a wonderful career. I had many other interactions with Chancellor Danforth that were positive, and he was just always a wonderful role model. So flash forward 4 years, and we had the exit scholarship dinner for my John B. Irvin program. And so my parents, of course, returned to campus because it was graduation weekend, and they had the dinner again. And Chancellor Danforth and his wife, of course, were there again also. And my father actually, you know, had been walking up to the dinner and he's like, oh, we're going to get to see Chancellor Danforth again, but he won't remember me. It was 4 years ago and it was so long. And so we walk in, no one's wearing name tags or anything. And Chancellor Danforth walks right up to my father and says, hello, Mr. Hayes, how are you? Are you still in the public health service? And my dad was just so chuffed by that. He still talks about it to this day. And that is, let's see here, 26 years later. And his experience and just the warmth and wonderfulness of Chancellor Danforth, the way he made really all of us feel so very welcome at Washington University, regardless of our background or where we came from. And that was huge for me. And it made me immediately feel like Washington University was a home and a family. And he made sure that the institution really lived up to that. Perhaps a bit subconsciously, somehow I ended up following in more footsteps of Chancellor Danforth than I even realized initially before I did it. And I actually ended up going to Washington University School of Medicine to earn my MD and become a pediatrician, specifically a pediatric infectious diseases and HIV specialist. And I, you know, again, that spirit of generosity, of humbleness, of giving to others, of really realizing that, you know, you're not above anyone and you're not above doing anything to help another person. And obviously my parents modeled a lot of that as well, but Chancellor Danforth certainly modeled it as well on a very high level. Also probably not Chancellor Danforth takes some credit, as well as Washington University, for me really making St. Louis now my second home. And I really, you know, can't say enough positive about Chancellor Danforth. And I will say, you know, when I heard of his passing, you know, it just, you know, he was just such a truly great man, especially to think of in these times. You know, he was a man who was, you know, born into what many would say the lap of luxury, with, you know, a lot of privileges and a lot of advantages. And, you know, he could have coasted on that and, you know, still probably be considered a great man and having done good things. But he really decided to really dedicate himself in service to others, in the uplifting of others, which is just such an amazing testament and something that we need so much more of in this world. And he will be so incredibly missed by us all, and particularly by my family. Thank you.
Thank you, Ericka. We're now going to hear from a classmate of yours and friend of mine, Mr. Gregg Walker, class of 1994, Bachelor of Arts in Economics. Gregg.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you to the committee for inviting me to be a part of this. It is an honor to be a part of this event. Not only am I a classmate of Ericka Hayes, I'm an Irvin Scholar alumnus with her, as well as with the speakers to follow, Delvin and Charlotte. Very proud to be here with them. I'm just going to take 3 minutes, but it would take me 3 weeks or 3 months to take you through all the ways in which Dr. Danforth had an impact on my life. He was, of course, the chancellor for all 4 years that I was an undergrad. 2 of those years I was student union president. And one of the incidents that I want to talk about, I want to just try to boil it down to 2 incidents instead of taking up those 3 months. One incident reminds me of what JT said earlier about how Chancellor Danforth saved student life. I went with another student leader to Dr. Danforth's office before a big speech that I was due to make, to tell him that in that speech I was going to directly oppose the efforts of one of his senior staff members. And I expected him to encourage me not to take that harsh stance. But instead, he said, while he always supports his staff, he also supports me in saying whatever's on my mind. I went to that event, I gave the speech, and to my surprise, I got a standing ovation. But as I made my way back to my seat, I saw Chancellor Danforth standing there, cheering me on as well. And I find that a big part of his character was that he encouraged people to be critical of him and the work he was doing, even though there was no more respected leader in all of higher education. In many ways, what made him so big was that he never treated anyone like they were small. I used that as a model of leadership as I've had leadership opportunities, and hopefully someday I will live up to the standard that he set. I want to talk about one other incident that is burned into my memory. When I was in my first term as student body president, the presidential debate occurred on campus in 1992. President George H.W. Bush, along with Governor Bill Clinton and Ross Perot, came to campus for the presidential debate, and the whole world was focused on our campus for that period of time. Chancellor Danforth insisted that student leaders be there to greet these candidates as they arrived on campus. And as you see in that picture there, that's me greeting the President of the United States in 1992. But after greeting those candidates, we went over to Mallinckrodt Center, the student center of the time, to watch the debate with many other students in a big auditorium. Chancellor Danforth greeted all the dignitaries at the debate officially on stage and did a brilliant job. But he gave up his seat in the auditorium with those dignitaries so that a student could sit in that seat. He walked across campus and joined the bulk of the students in the auditorium with us. And as he entered the auditorium, he got a standing ovation. And it is, for me, my fondest memory of my time at Washington University. When the whole world was watching us, he, as our leader, made us all proud, and he was able to receive our adulation and admiration in real time. I definitely want to thank the committee for allowing me to be a part of this event. I'm grateful that I was able to have my life cross paths with Dr. Danforth. And I hope, as I said earlier, that I will live up to the standards that he set in my life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gregg. You've already introduced them, but we are now going to hear from Delvin and Charlotte Jones Burton, class Arts and Sciences, class of 1995. Delvin and Charlotte, good to see you.
Thank you, Rob. Nice to see you, and it's truly an honor for Charlotte and I to be a part of this particular tribute. First, want to just give a shout out to my fellow urban scholars. Ericka, great to see you. Gregg, great to see you. It is always, Charlotte and I laugh all the time because we spend so much time together that everyone thought that she was an urban scholar as well. So she's an honorary urban scholar in my book, given the amount of time that we spent together. Charlotte and I met on campus and was subsequently married in Graham Chapel the day after graduation. And I think what is unique about that particular piece is that Dr. Danforth actually showed up for a portion of our wedding. He couldn't stay for the entire event, told me he couldn't make the reception, but he definitely wanted to make sure that he had an opportunity to see us get married, which I think is a testament to his dedication to students, not only to who we are to become professionally, but who we were personally as well. So I've heard a number of, and I will refer to him probably throughout this conversation as Chan Dan, because that's sort of who he was to me. Yeah, every time that I would kind of call it, we would talk, Dr. Danforth, and he would just call me Bill Delvin. But so I told him I couldn't do that. I was raised in the South. I can go for Chan Dan, but there was no way I was going to sit and call him Bill, given his stature on campus and who he was in terms of being a much senior, of course, to me at that particular point. But I heard a number of adjectives that were used throughout this call, and two that came up for me. One probably makes sense to a number of people on this call. The other will probably perplex folks a little bit, but trust me, I'll explain. So the two words that we would like to focus on, and Charlotte's going to speak to one specifically, is the word ally, or the term ally. And for me, it's farmer. And again, I'll explain when I get to my particular opportunity why indeed that label of farmer fits Chancellor Danforth as well. So Charlotte.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'll take you to a time that we remember Chandan fondly. It was around 1993, Delvin, or maybe it was 94, and Delvin was president of the Association of Black Students. And there was a brochure that was published, a beautiful brochure, very colorful admissions brochure. And we looked at the brochure and we noticed that there was no one in the brochure that looked like us. And we thought we would challenge the status quo, and we called Chancellor Danforth to an ABS meeting, and we had a frank discussion with him at that meeting. We didn't give him a heads up like Gregg mentioned. He gave a heads up, I don't recall. And we talked and we basically just said, you know, open this brochure and can you tell us why there's no one here who looks like us? And all I recall is his response. He acknowledged, he took responsibility. He didn't point fingers, and he corrected the action. And I will say that we were next time there was a photo shoot and we were included in the admissions brochure.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think just to build on that particular story, I think what's interesting, or not interesting, but significant, is the fact that thousands of brochures have been already printed. This was prepared and almost ready to go out, and we just happened to get our hands on one of the brochures, being that as president of the Association of Black Students, I was often involved in a number of the admissions activities. And I can remember bringing it to Charlotte and just like, I can't believe this, you have to look at this. But again, I think a testament to who Chancellor Danforth was at heart, and that notion of wanting to see students challenge the status quo and supporting that, even if it meant the expense sometimes that came with it by the university. So, Chancellor Danforth, the farmer. Again, I'm sure you all are perplexed, trust me. I probably say in the vein of Black Baptist ministers, I'm gonna get to the point and you all will see that it makes sense. But it was a spring day in 1993 where I received notification from Chancellor Danforth to come to his office. And in spring of 1993, I was president of the Association of Black Students. So you can imagine, I'm sure that I was being called because something had happened or I had done something that had ruffled somebody's feathers. And I was only going to be asked to apologize, or there was some reason, something that I had done to get in trouble. But indeed, when I arrived, Chancellor Danforth invited me in, and he quickly asked me, you know, what did I plan to do after graduation? You know, I was in my junior year, what did I plan to do? And I simply told him I planned to teach, because I was in the education department, was graduating with a degree in elementary education. So I was looking forward to having my own, my own classroom of students to work with. So he nodded his head, told me that sounds like a great and noble idea, but he wanted me to take a meeting. And you know, Junior, you want me to take a meeting? I'm sure. And he said, I want you to go to the Danforth Foundation, and you need to speak to a gentleman named Bruce Anderson. And Bruce at the time was president at the Danforth Foundation. Of course, I followed Chancellor Danforth's guidance and direction at that particular point. What ultimately resulted out of it was that summer, I had the opportunity to intern at the Danforth Foundation, which was really significant. Significant because I had the opportunity to work with a number of individuals who were developing school leaders at the superintendent level, at the principal level, at the teacher level, doing a lot for children, not only in the St. Louis area, but across the country. Subsequently, I guess you can fast forward to 20, 25 years later, and I, through my work, have had the opportunity to work with and develop over 500 school leaders, right? 500 school leaders, impacting indirectly over 40,000 students across the country. So again, I go back to that notion of farmer, right? A farmer is one who plants seeds. And then you watch and have an opportunity to see the seeds that you plant, harvest, grow, and develop, right? And I would ultimately say that in Chancellor Danforth, he planted seeds of leadership, of courage, of scholarship. And since his time at WashU and probably beyond, the harvests have been many and great, right? You look at the people who were on this call today and you listen to the impact that Chancellor Danforth has had on all of us. And again, a testament to who he was as an individual and a leader for us all. He will, of course, be greatly missed. And as I'm not a big believer in terms of RIP meaning rest in peace. For me, it is ultimately rest in power. So Chandan, rest in power, my friend.
Thank you so much, Delvin and Charlotte. I know there may be some law school alums on the call who've been anxious that we haven't heard from anybody from the School of Law, but I'm happy to introduce Christopher Clinton Conway, a law graduate from the class of 1996.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate being here. This is such an esteemed group of alums. I'd like to say that I'm happy to be here because there's no one else I would celebrate than Bill Danforth, but at the same time, I'm saddened by the loss of a dear friend and someone I considered a mentor. While the finality of our relationship was inevitable, I'm honored to be part of his legacy. In 1993, I was asked by the law school Office of Admissions Dean to create a gay group, as they called it, for gay, lesbian, and bisexual students. And to give you some context, in 1993, it was the time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the AIDS panic, and living in the proverbial closet. For those of you who know me, law school or otherwise, bespoke events are my specialty. So I immediately decamped to Plaza Frontenac to purchase Crane's imitations, found a printer in the Central West End who could engrave them, booked Whitmore House and phoned Straub's to build me a cheese board and crudité platter to impress everyone. The invitations were sent across the campus and legal communities in St. Louis. And on the night of the event, I sat ready for the social event of the year. My conservative goal was to have 40 attendees, but I was ready for as many as 100. Minutes past the start time, no one had shown. 10 minutes past 6, the doors opened, and both Bill Danforth and Elizabeth Gray Danforth walked in. Arm in arm, casually but with purpose. I always referred to Mrs. Danforth as Elizabeth Gray Danforth, and it delighted them both for some reason. He was warm and welcoming and spent the entire night sitting with me talking about the state of the world. No one else actually attended the event, but in many ways it was a great success. In 2014, I was honored by the law school, as you see in that photo, with their Distinguished Young Alumni Award. And when the committee asked if there was anyone at the university who had made an indelible impact on me, without hesitation, I said Chancellor Danforth. When I wrote to him to ask if he would introduce me at the ceremony, he replied that in more than 50 years at the university, no one ever had asked him to introduce them for an award. So he did that for me, and we had breakfast the next morning. And from that point forward, we were in regular communication. Telephone calls, letters, visits to St. Louis. Bill took an interest in my life and work in philanthropy. I advised him and he advised me. He relished in the information of who had what and how he could get some of it for either the University or the Plant Science Center, and that's my specialty. I had a chance to say goodbye to Bill in a brief but meaningful telephone call earlier this year. And I miss him, but I know he is home with Elizabeth Gray Danforth, and so I can't be sad. So thank you all for letting me share my memory, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. All right, our last alumni who is speaking to us live this evening is my friend, Jackie Levy, who earned her undergraduate degree from Washington University in 1997 and a law degree in 2001. Jackie.
Thank you, Rob. It's really such a privilege to be able to share reflections on Dr. Danforth's legacy with so many incredible alumni. And really great to see folks like Gregg Walker, with whom I had the opportunity to serve as a student through our involvement in Student Union. Like others have shared, what I remember most fondly about Chancellor Danforth was his ability to lift up everyone around him. While he was advancing WashU along an astounding trajectory, he always made it a priority to personally acknowledge the contributions of everyone who played a role in enriching the Washington University experience. This was obviously before email and texting, and certainly no small feat. In 1989, at the request of both students and faculty, Chancellor Danforth established WashU's annual Holocaust Memorial Lecture to commemorate the Holocaust and address its broader implications for other instances of systematic persecution and genocide. He had appointed me to serve on that committee in 1994 as a sophomore, and I had the privilege of introducing the lecturer that year. While I no longer recall who the speaker was or their message, what I do remember is the handwritten note that Dr. Danforth sent me shortly after, thanking me for participating and complimenting me on my public speaking. As an emerging student leader, that kind of praise was so special and so affirming. Little did I know that other notes would later follow. Dr. Danforth never missed an opportunity to recognize others and express his personal gratitude. As the world around us has become more chaotic, this practice has become a lost art, but it remains more important than ever. And if Dr. Danforth could take a moment to send a handwritten note to recognize a random sophomore student, we can all do the same. Chan Dan's ability to make himself so approachable made him universally adored. It was a different time back then, and I remember when he even stopped by our Ruby 3 keg at Wild. In my professional role now as CEO of WashU Hillel, I'm grateful for the critical role that Dr. Danforth played in helping our campus Jewish community grow and thrive over the decades. Just a few weeks ago at our Campus Reflections program, Chancellor Martin read from one of Dr. Danforth's Thanksgiving letters about faith. Chan Dan was a man of faith who lived by his convictions, and although he came from a very different background, he developed a close personal friendship with Hillel's executive director at the time, Rabbi Jim Diamond. Dr. Danforth and Alvin Goldfarb served as honorary chairs of Hillel's 50th anniversary, and he continued to support our Hillel every year. Upon one's passing in the Jewish community, we offer these words: may their memory be a blessing. Dr. Danforth was a legend in American higher education, a legend at WashU and throughout the St. Louis region, and we know his memory will be a blessing, not only for each of us, as we've heard tonight and through the chat, but for the generations of Washington University students following in our footsteps. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. That photo is incredible from Wild. Okay, I'm going to queue up a short video submission before we have our final speaker. The video has been submitted by Matt and Michelle Holton, who are from the undergraduate class of 1995. Michelle also earned, excuse me, my introduction is wrong here, but they have graduate degrees in engineering and business as well. So Matt and Michelle.
When I think about Chancellor Danforth, I'm reminded of his presence. He was warm, he was kind, he always had people gathered around him. He was just the kind of person that you looked up to, literally. But he just had this way that never made you feel small.
We're going to miss his smile, his stories, but certainly be forever grateful for having known him.
Okay, our last speaker, I'm honored to introduce a member of the class of 2022, who I've come to know personally over the last couple of years, who also is a Danforth Scholar. We wanted to end on this note with Helen Weebly Brown. I think Dr. Danforth, one of the things that I've heard from our many speakers tonight is just how important it was to always honor the past, but always look towards the future. And Helen is a person that those of us who work with students here at Washington University often think of when we think about what the future will be bringing for us. So Helen, thank you for being with us tonight, and you get to close us out.
Thank you. I would not be at WashU if it weren't for the Danforth Scholarship. Far more than a generous financial investment in my college education, the Danforth Scholarship has been a source of incredible mentors, role models, and friends that have enriched my experience. These are people who have been there for me at my highest points in college and there to support me through my lowest points too. From running college council campaign to opening their homes to me when I had nowhere to go during the holidays, Danforth has given me a community of people that go above and beyond to help others and inspire me to do the same. And when I say that the best part of the Danforth Scholars community is the people, I'm reminded of the person whose guiding principles we each seek to embody and uphold, Dr. Danforth. Indeed, in honoring the legacy of Dr. Danforth, the scholarship is a call to commit oneself to a life of virtue and service. Our namesake pushes us to not just pursue excellence for ourselves, but to see and nurture it in all those around us. And rather than just set these high expectations for others, Dr. Danforth demonstrated this commitment to community and care for others in all that he did. During my freshman year, I actually, along with a few other Danforth scholars, was fortunate enough to get to read him a short essay on what Danforth meant to us. As we each read to him, he would give us a smile of encouragement and wait until the end of each essay to make a soft-spoken and witty comment. And he didn't let the attention linger on himself or on all of his incredible achievements. Instead, he offered advice and honest reflections on his experiences. It didn't matter whether you had a fancy title or if you were just in your first year of college. He was a leader who was present in the moment, would really listen to you, and cared about what you had to say. This one short interaction that I had with Dr. Danforth exemplified the kindness, humility, and integrity that guided his actions, and will continue to shape the actions of those who looked up to him. It is an honor to be able to call myself a Danforth scholar. It is a blessing to be surrounded by such ambitious and kind leaders in our community. And to Danforth scholars and other WashU students, past, present, and future, Dr. Danforth will always serve as a stellar example of what it means to catch a passion for helping others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. And with that, we are going to close our program for this evening. I'd like to thank all of our outstanding alumni speakers for your stories, for your tributes, and for all of you this evening who joined us. Thank you for this very touching tribute. Good night.